We are your hosts, Jeremy Lapidus and Shane Brisland. So happy to be back here with you. It's been a while, Shane, since we have done a real show, but stuff is going on in the world of hockey. The draft just kicked off. We have seen everything go on in day one of free agency trades. Big moves. There is a lot in the world of hockey, and we're going to cover all of it here. But before we do, just how you doing, man? It's been a bit since we've had you here on the Triple Threat Show. Glad to have you back. Founding member Shane Brisland over
Yeah,
here.
thanks for having me. I've been really busy. I don't recommend trying to speed run a nursing degree while also trying to fit in your occasional beer league game while you can. But I'm enjoying what I'm learning. The grind is real. I worked out today for the first time in like 6 weeks because I
Let's
was just bogged
go.
down with schoolwork and working two part-time jobs. But I'm enjoying all of the hockey news that's going on, and I'm excited to talk about what has happened in these past few days because it's been as hectic as always during
Yeah,
this time of year.
absolutely, it has been. Let's start off with the news of the day. Free agency obviously opened up today, Shane, and there were a couple of big moves. The biggest one in my mind, and the one that I kind of want to start off with, Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner was the big fish heading into free agency. He leaves the Maple Leafs, joins Vegas. That is huge. That is a massive deal. I didn't think he was ever going to leave the Maple Leafs with what they had over there with Matthews. I know there was a lot of stuff going on as far as smoke with his lack of getting a new contract, but he is gone now. What does this mean for Vegas? What does this mean for the Maple Leafs too? Because I think this really cripples them going forward.
So there's a lot of moving parts to this situation. First, Alex Petrangelo is done all of next season. He's getting some pretty major hip surgery done. So God knows if he's ever going to be the same player. Like, it's kind of similar to Landeskog, where he's going to be gone for a while. And I know modern medicine, he could come back better than ever, but you just never know when these injuries are that severe. So him being on LTIR saves up a ton of cap, as it the Vegas Golden Knight way, where you save a bunch of money because a player's conveniently injured, and then you can bring in another big contract.
Yeah,
And
go for it.
I think the Leafs just had to do something different. You know, the definition of insanity. Like, something had to change. Does it suck that he left for, I don't want to say, so because it was a sign in trade, so we get that extra year. So they got Nick Waugh, who's a good bottom six center, kill penalties, forechecks really well. So they didn't get nothing because he's a serviceable player, but he's not going to put up nearly as many points as Mitch Marner will.
Yeah, no, Mitch Marner was that second offensive option behind, Austin Matthews, of course, one of the best pure goal scorers we have in our league right now.
Yeah,
This
he was
Vegas
the
roster.
Backstrom to his Ovechkin, pretty much.
Yeah, and I mean, they were a pretty good duo. I mean, obviously, all the struggles that they had getting into the play or getting past the first round, second round in the playoffs is a meme in and of itself over there, but it's kind of sad. You look at the era of Maple Leafs hockey that kind of feels like it's at an end with the departure of Mitch Marner. I'm sure they'll still be good. Like I said, they still have Austin Matthews. They just had their best goaltender in maybe the last 10 years, their best goaltender performance this year. But this really hurts the Leafs. And I understand that Vegas roster is going to be stacked, but how much does this affect the Leafs? How are they going to be heading into next season if they don't make any major move going forward to replace a guy like Mitch Marner?
So everyone in hockey media compares this team to the Washington Capitals.
Really?
Ovi didn't win his first cup till he was, what, 34?
Mhm.
And so the narrative is like, when are they going to get over the hump? When are they going to finally do it? And they won it when it wasn't necessarily their best roster. So like, yes, they didn't have the core guys were still around. Your Backstroms, your Ovechkins, your Oshis, your John Carlsons, your Holtby. They were still around. But over the time of the Caps contending, they lost some pretty major key pieces like Mike Green. His successor, John Carlson, came in. Maybe that akin to Matthew Nyes, the rookie who had a phenomenal season this year, who also got a huge contract. Maybe he's the guy that comes in and takes Marner's place. Alexander Semin, 40 goal
Yes.
scorer. He left the Capitals. And then they just had to find other ways to make it work. So you still have Matthews, John Tavares. Yes, he's not getting any younger, but he's a very serviceable player. William Nylander, one of their most consistent playoff performers, he's still there. Morgan Riley, their core piece, they still have enough where they will be a playoff team again. But they're just in a tough division, but they'll find a way to make it work. The cap space for letting Marner go leaves you with options. So it will be interesting to see what the Leafs do going forward, because it's like way too early to notice the effect Marner leaving will have.
The one thing I will say when you're making this comparison to the Washington Capitals is there was like a little period of time there where, you had to find those next guys. And the other thing that stops me from comparing it is the Caps always had great goaltending. That has been the opposite of the Leafs. To speak to
Yeah.
speak very, very brutally there. They have had a lot of trouble with goaltending. You could argue the team from 2 or 3 years ago could have made a cup run if they had solid goaltending, right? They just have not had that answer, and they found a little bit of an answer before injuries took place in the playoffs this year in net. But is it enough to propel them in a little bit of a cold spell? Because they're going to take a step back here. And I'm not saying they're not going to make the playoffs, but they're not going to be that 90 to 100 point team that they've been for the last 5 years-ish at the top of their division. It's going to be a lot tougher. But back on the Vegas side of things, because they have a very scary roster now, right? You have Mitch Marner being paired up with Mark Stone when healthy. You have guys like Jack Eichel on that team. This is an incredibly stacked roster, one that was near the top of the West last year yet again. Where does this leave them? Are they were still cup contenders last year, but they've had some trouble in the playoffs, especially against the Stars these last couple seasons. Is this the kind of move that can push them to that next level past a Stars-esque roster?
It definitely makes them more competitive. The problem with the West, it is so top heavy. Like, it is a bloodbath trying to get out there. Like, not saying Florida had, like, it's really hard to win the Stanley Cup. You have to beat 4 really
Right.
good teams. But I believe Florida, they had a less difficult path. I think anyone will tell you the
For sure.
Eastern Conference route that Florida had, it was an easier route than going on the West, because you had to go through the Oilers. You have to go through the Dallas Stars. You have to go through the Vegas Golden Knights. The previous 2 Stanley Cup champions on top of the team that made it to the finals twice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to beat each of those teams, and it's not going to get any easier. I want to shout out the Minnesota Wild, because I think the Minnesota Wild, they kind of showed Vegas had some weakness.
They did.
They thought they were just going to run over the Wild, but, there were some weaknesses with that team. So who knows if, with Pietrangelo leaving, how shaky their goaltending is. Like, their defense is not as good. Like, yes, you add a superstar forward, your offense has next level depth now. But my concern for Vegas is Hill your guy?
Right.
With Pietrangelo leaving, who's stepping up on defense? But I think they're going to try to outscore their problems like they did when they won the Cup with adding Mitch Marner.
Well, they also had a godlike goaltending performance when they won the Cup. I believe that was Hill in net.
It was more by committee.
But he
because Logan Thompson
Yeah.
played some games. Yeah, Hill eventually took the crease, but I think Hill he stopped the pucks he needed to, and that's why they won.
Right. And again, it's my motto when it comes to hockey: goaltending wins championships, right? Screw defense wins championships. It's goaltending that wins championships in my book. And
Yeah.
that's why I always harp on it with the Leafs, with the Oilers, whenever we're talking about it. I
Well, you
don't
could argue that Stolars was their guy
well,
until Sam
Storlar's
Bennett
he was, and then he
injured
got
him.
hurt. Exactly.
Sam
That's
Bennett may or may not have intentionally ran into him.
that's a whole nother issue over there for Sam Bennett and the way that he
Just
accidentally keeps
to
running into
PSA,
goaltenders.
I am a Florida Panthers hater. So I will never give them the benefit of the doubt. Very good hockey team. I will not knock. They deserve the cup. Let's get that straight. They deserve the cup. They deserve to win back to back. Very good team. Very good constructing their roster and cap management. Very likely to three-peat. I'm going to hate on them.
You think they're going to three-peat?
They have a good chance. Like, I'm not going to say they are. I hope they don't. But they have a very good chance to.
That's fair. That East is so wide open every year. You can never count them out. And the West, it's a gauntlet.
If they were in the West,
no way, not a shot. Because you got the gauntlet, like you were saying, it's a gauntlet to get through it. And then you're so beat up when it comes to the finals, and you go against an East team that's relatively fresh. Although I will say, the East plays more physical than the West does, so it's a different kind of gauntlet. The West is more talented, but it's less physical, at least in my mind when I'm watching these games.
Yeah. The West, watching the West in the first few rounds, they're so fast.
Yes.
Like every team plays with so much speed.
It really is that East and West Coast divide. You see it in every sport, and it always kind of works out. Like in football, that hard-nosed football style, that's East Coast football. The West Coast spread offense, that gunslinger offense, that's called West Coast offense. You know, it's the same thing in every single sport. You see it in hockey. But I'm getting off topic here. Not just Mitch Marner. He was not the only one that got signed in free agency, Shane. Who were the other ones that we're taking a look at? What are the big ones that we need to go over here?
Well, I think I would like to start this before what happened in free agency, because there was a few huge trades that happened in free agency. And the thing with the East, I think there's kind of a power shift. You know, the Rangers, they fell off this year. And the team that has taken a step forward, because you always have that trio, Ottawa, Detroit, Montreal, Buffalo. We thought who was going to be that team that took the step, and the team that took that step was the Montreal Canadiens,
yes, they
noticeably. And then they made a move to really try to prove, hey, we're in this fight now too. We're a playoff team. And they made a huge trade for Noah Dobson. They traded, 2 firsts and Emil. I'm going to butcher his name. It starts with it's like Heineman or something. Like a blockbuster trade for Noah Dobson. And his big thing was he had a 70-point season 2 seasons ago. He kind of had an all-right season this year. There are questions about his defensive game, but he seems like your top pairing defenseman. He's only 25. He got a massive contract. He seems like a 40 to 50 point kind of defenseman every season. So him with Lane Hudson and that defensive core they're building up, like their back end is set for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely. This is a Canadiens team that took that big step. Of course, Calder winning rookie in Hudson over there. Definitely a huge part of that on that defensive pairing. But also, you have to remember, this is a Canadiens team that not that long ago was in the Cup, carried, of course, by the final great season of one Carey Price. But still, this is a team that had a lot of young guys that are still on that roster from that Cup run. So they have the experience in the playoffs if they ever get back there to know what they're dealing with. And we saw a little bit of it in the Capitals series where even though they lost in 5 games, they battled back in a couple of those. They forced overtime in game 1 when it looked a little hopeless. They won the first game at home, winning big, really. At the end of the day, they were just kind of outmatched. But you have a lot of guys that have that playoff experience, and you make these win-now moves, it makes a lot of sense to me. They've been trying to recover from the loss of Carey Price, right? That's been the big I guess, hurdle that they're trying to clear over the last, what is it, 5 years since they've been to the cup. But it seems like they've really made strides in that. And again, getting a rookie of the year winner on your team, along with a lot of the young talent that you were just talking about. I like the win now moves. They're in a position, especially with that open East that we were talking about, that they could be that kind of surprise team even more than they were last season.
Yeah. And to go back to the Islanders side of things, they had a really good draft. Like I don't know why. So Matthew Schaefer was taken first overall. He's projected to be like a really good offensive defenseman, future power play quarterback, right shot. Um, Although this is a weaker draft class and Schaefer's a really good prospect, he needs some time before he comes into the NHL. He needs to marinate a little bit before he can become that star NHL player he's projected to be. But they killed it with the draft picks they got in return from Montreal. Victor Eklund, his brother plays for the San Jose Sharks. A lot of mocks had him in the top 10, and then he fell to the Islanders. So you could argue that the Islanders pretty much had two top 10 prospects from this draft class. And then with their other first round pick they got from Montreal, they got this Acheson kid who is a hard hitting, good defensive defenseman, or at least is projected to be.
Hmm.
So I don't love the Dobson move. It is so hard to find a top pairing right shot defenseman in this league who's young. You could have signed him to a contract and have your top right-handed defenseman. Like he had 70 points. Like I can't name a lot of defensemen in the NHL who had a 70-point season. You have your
It doesn't happen
Makars,
that
your
often.
Quinn Hughes, like Hudson almost did it. Like, and they gave that away. I guess I don't know what was going on with management, if they have some issues with this game, if there was a bridge that was burned,
Hmm.
but at least they got assets that could pan out to replicate what Noah Dobson has done and could be.
Yeah,
So I think it's a trade for right now that looks like it has worked well for both teams.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you can get 3 first-round picks in a draft, you want to take that, especially for a team that, in the Islanders, feels like they're rebuilding. I was talking about the Canadians being young and up and coming, but the Islanders are kind of going in the opposite direction. You had an older team in the Islanders that were competing 5 years ago. They never really made it past that Eastern Conference Final series over there, but still, they're a little bit older at this point, and they don't really have that for sure answer that they're going to build around for the future, which hurts. And sometimes you have to look in the mirror and prevent a long term rebuild by pushing the eject button. And that's how I kind of feel the Islanders were with this offseason heading in. It was not the season that they expected heading in. So they hit the big red button. They blew it all up, and I don't blame them. I don't know if you have a different feeling on this, but I didn't see a long-term future for that core
Now they
with the
should
New
have
York
done this
Islanders.
like 2 or 3 seasons ago, but it's better late than never
Right.
that they're at least starting to try to rebuild and recuperate assets for some of their aging veterans.
And it's one of those things that you never really want to talk about as a sports fan or as a sports front office because that's your livelihood, that's your team. These are the guys that you're putting a lot of stake in, but sometimes it's just over. And you need to know when to do that, not become a Pittsburgh Steelers situation where you're in I guess Pittsburgatory for forever, right? It's not a good situation
Yeah.
over there. But no, I do think you're right. It was a good starting point for the Islanders to get a lot of value, and I like the win now move for the Montreal Canadiens a lot,
Yeah. Your team just made playoffs. They're hungry for more. I bet the locker room really loves that they're making a push to be competitive.
for sure, for sure.
And then there was another big pre-trade move, I mean pre-draft move that happened, and it was for JJ Paterka heads over to the Utah Mammoth and then proceeds to sign another big deal. And I think the Mammoth, they're a scary team. Like like if they had a semblance of if their defense stayed healthy and they had some semblance of consistent goaltending, they were right in it.
That's
for
a
that
lot of
wild
ifs,
card
man.
race.
That's a lot of ifs.
Well, you can't beat health, you know.
I know you can't
But
beat
that they
health.
have a really young, exciting core coming up.
I mean, that's what happens when you've been the Coyotes for the last 20 years, right?
Yeah, but they're Utah now. They're like making moves to try to get that wild card. I don't the Central is too top heavy for me to see them getting a top 3 playoff spot, but they are definitely in wild card contention now with adding JJ Peterka, who in his first full NHL season put up 68 points. And now you're having him play with Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, Dylan Gunther, Sergachev, and then they're signing depth pieces around those guys to help bolster that lineup. Like I really like what Utah's doing. You know, they had another top 5 draft pick. They have another really good prospect coming up in the system. Like things are coming to fruition there.
I could see it. I could see it. They'd have to be that second wild card. I think there's pretty comfortably 7 teams ahead of them in the West, at least. You've obviously got the 3 top teams in the Central, and the Avs, the Stars, and the Jets. The Pacific, you've got the Kings, Oilers, and Knights up there. But behind them, I think the Wild are still going to be better than them, regardless. They've still got Kaprizov. They've still got a really solid team. You could make the argument for the Preds. I don't know if I'm willing to die on that hill there.
No. I think. Oh God! Now that you bring up the Preds, I don't know what Barry Trotz is doing.
I
You
mean,
know,
it was a
I think we.
disaster last season. Everything
Yeah,
went wrong. But I mean, they still got a lot of the same pieces, and they were a playoff team 2 years ago. Things can still turn around. They're an old team, but you could slot them into 7. I know the Blues had a solid season last year, and maybe they would be ahead of them too. But it's not going to be easy for the Mammoth in their first season with a name. Congratulations to
yeah.
that. But
Because I'm not sold on St. Louis because Jordan Bennington hasn't really been consistent as a elite goalie. He's kind of panned out to be a solid starter when he needs to be, but he can't carry a team to a playoff spot. He has clutch moments, but he hasn't been that guy in the regular season. They have a lot of good pieces, but they just they're a very good team, but their ceiling isn't high. Utah has a high ceiling. Like Nashville, yeah, they're not a playoff team because Roman Yossi, they're only getting older.
right,
And you tanked this season, and you have players that aren't going to get any better. And then you may not have Yossi. Yossi's dealing with a heart condition, so hope he's healthy. He's a top caliber defenseman, but who knows what's going to happen with him? UC Saros, phenomenal goaltender, had a regress to this season.
hmm
Will he turn back to form? And you just have a lot of ifs with older players. Like Philip Forsberg is still the star on that offense, but who else is going to do it? Are
right.
these big contracts with aging players? Are they going to bounce back? But I just don't think they are. Their division is just too competitive. There's just too many questions. I think they're going to be in the McKenna sweepstakes for next year.
I tend to
Because
agree
I
with
think
you.
every team is going to try to tank next year for this prospect. Gavin McKenna, if you haven't heard of him, he's very hyped up. He's put up ridiculous numbers. I think he's committed to play hockey in Michigan this year. So just keep an eye out for that. And then this draft, they drafted Brady Martin, 5th overall. And a lot of scouts really didn't like that pick. I love his story, though. He missed the draft because he would rather help out. He had to help out on his farm. His family owns a farm that he regularly helps. So he seems like that guy who didn't play hockey 24/7. He just kind of, when the season started, he played. Summer hits, he's got to help out on the farm.
Hey, it keeps you in
So,
shape, though.
yeah, prospect wise, he was still like in the 10 to 15 range, not necessarily top 5. There's like players that a lot of people liked better, like James Haggins and Porter Martoni, but that was seen as a big reach. We'll see if it pans out. But there's just a lot of questionable decisions being made, and none of them have come to fruition. I don't see any of them coming to fruition anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with you. They're getting older, and when you have a disastrous season like last year for the Preds, it's just it's not usually it might get a little better. It's not usually going to turn around.
Yeah, it's hard to get much worse, but you never know.
You never know. That's absolutely right. Uh, but I did wanna talk a little bit about you were talking about trades earlier, and there was another one today between the Rangers and the Canes as the Canes continue to try and get past that Eastern Conference Finals. It's been their Achilles heel forever. They make a trade for Kendre Miller from the Rangers and immediately give him a big contract today. Let's talk about that one. The Rangers, like you said, took a step back here this season. A lot of things went wrong for them. Sturkin was still good. He took a little bit of a step back, but he wasn't really the problem in my mind. I think it was just about everything else. The Canes, of
They could
course,
not score for shit.
yeah. The Canes, of course, very dangerous. They had Kendre Miller, and that's going to be huge for them. More depth is a winner in the NHL, but I would question if that's their big issue. As much as I like Freddie Anderson, he kind of folded in the ECF there. And I think that addressing the goaltender might be the biggest need for them. I don't dislike this trade for Kendre Miller, though, but I'm curious what your thoughts are as far as both of these sides.
So for the Rangers, I think they're trying to do a quick retool like they did back in 2020,
Mhm.
um, where they lucked, or depending on how you look at it now, they lucked into the first overall pick. He had a horrible second half of the season, but I don't know if it's a management situation or if it's a coaching situation.
Mhm.
There was just so much drama going on with that team last season, with players underperforming, and you trade away your captain in Jacob Truba. Chris Kreider's also gone. He's on the Ducks now too. There's been a bunch of rumors about Mika Zibanejad leaving, being traded. Um, there was Panarin that got dropped. That there was a scandal involving him a few years back that kind of got swept under the rug. And Keandre Miller was in the middle of all that because he wasn't playing as well as they thought he should be with the type of money he wanted in an extension.
Right.
So Keandre Miller, he's a young, talented player. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the shot to be a really good NHL defenseman. I think this is a good bet for Carolina. Did I think they gave him a little bit too much? Yes. Like his value could not have been any lower.
Mhm.
Like he's has shown flashes, especially when their Eastern Conference final run 2 years ago. He's had flashes of being a really good defenseman. He's still young. But if he becomes what he's projected to be, this is a really good move for Carolina. They lost Brent Burns. I'm not sure. I don't think Dmitry Orlov is on the team anymore. They needed to get some defensemen in there of good caliber to stay competitive because they are still one of those top teams in the East. So I really like the move for Carolina. Did I think if they give up a little bit too much? Yes, but they needed to do something. And I like the upside Keandre Miller has. And the Rangers, they get assets back. Good move for them. Who knows what other moves they're going to make. But I just don't see the Rangers unless Lafreniere and their other younger players take a huge step. I just don't see how they're going to be back in the playoffs next season, if not any time in the near future.
Yeah, the Rangers have made a lot of moves this offseason, but I want to stick with Carolina real quick. You brought up the defenseman that they lost. It's really just outgun Florida in the East, right? If you're a team that's trying to compete, your goal right now should be to make an anti-Florida team or at least a team that can stand up to Florida. You talk about physicality, Florida really does embody that, and bringing in a guy like Miller is going to be really big for their, I guess, physical identity. As much as he's great on offense, that the potential for his shot is there. He's really going to provide that kind of boost in the physical department more than anything, which we saw them lose to the Panthers a lot. They didn't have the guy that could stand up to Sam Bennett. They didn't have the guy that could stand up to Matthew Tkachuk. They didn't have these guys for these mental matchups that are not necessarily all in the game of hockey. I like this move a lot for them. I do. Again, it's not the move that I think is going to push them over the top for Florida. They're going to have to make a couple more moves, but I think this is a good start for Carolina as they try and get over the Panther hump that's in their way.
Yep, I agree with everything you just said. It's just when you bring up their goaltending, it's just what other
There isn't
good
another option.
goaltending is a bit. Yeah, there isn't really another option. Freddie Anderson, he's good enough to get you where you need to be.
Right.
You're just going to have to find other ways to make up for that.
And I think, I mean, we talked about it before the show. John Gibson on the trade market, right? He gets
Yeah.
traded over to the Red Wings. That's the kind of situation that if I'm the Canes, I'm trying to get in on. And I know I've got a soft spot in my heart for my boy John Gibson, right? I love what he does for the Ducks over there, what he did for the Ducks over there on not winning efforts, what he's done on Team USA in the past. A big fan of John Gibson, right? But that's the kind of guy that I would have targeted if I'm Carolina. He clearly was on the market, and it's a lot to give up for a goaltender that's getting a little bit up there in age and has an expensive contract, yes. But if you're trying to win cups, your window isn't as big as you might think it is, right? And I know we see teams like the Oilers and the Panthers and the Lightning and the Capitals and the Penguins and the Bruins that are continuing to be competitive for 10 plus years, right? These teams that are in the second round all the time, making big pushes at the top of their division. But that's not normal, right? That's not a normal thing. It's a shorter window than you think, especially with the way that players are moving around in the sport now.
Yeah, there's so much parity in hockey. Like teams get competitive so quickly with a few moves, or if every player on a team makes a jump in their development. And I I would have much rather them get that John Gibson trade just confuses me because there's so many teams that could have used his services and they didn't make the cap room to fit him in. Like his prime in Anaheim was phenomenal, and he's put up decent numbers in front of some awful Anaheim Ducks teams. It still blows my mind that no general manager wanted to make a move for a goalie of his caliber for the most important position in hockey. I mean, at least Detroit made a move for him. I really like that move for Detroit. It's like 5 months too late when they were trying to make the playoffs and they didn't have a goaltender to save their lives. They had like 4 or 5 goalies this year because no one wanted to fucking take the job. And so now that solidifies that position. But I just don't think Detroit still has enough to put them over the edge, even with a goaltender of Gibson's caliber. I mean, he could. I believe if we see like late 2010s John Gibson, he could carry that team to a wild card spot, a la Charlie Lindgren.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's just I have so many questions about that Detroit roster. They just don't seem to have the star power, in my opinion, to get ahead of teams in the very competitive Atlantic. Because Tampa's not going anywhere, Florida's not going anywhere, the Leafs aren't going anywhere, Montreal just got better. Are you really gonna do you have enough to make that final wild card?
Yeah, I'm gonna guess no, honestly, and it hurts to say because when Detroit is good at hockey, it's a good time in this sport, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just a really stacked Atlantic division. We talked about the Leaves taking a step back; they'll be fine. They'll still be good. The Lightning and the Bruins. I think the Bruins, even though behind a down season, I think they'll be able to take a little bit of a step forward this year. You have, of course, the Florida Panthers, two-time defending Stanley Cup champions in that division. The Ottawa Senators were really good last season, and there's no
Made the
reason to
playoffs.
think that they're not going to be at least as good this year. That's already 4, potentially 5 teams in your own division, and we haven't even looked at the Metro yet. The Metro that has the Hurricanes, it has the Caps, it has the Devils, it has the Penguins, excuse me, not the Penguins, it has the
Yeah,
Rangers.
Penguins aren't doing it.
No, they're not. The Devils made the playoffs last year too, right? And they are going to be really good if they're
Without
healthy.
Jack Hughes.
They're going to be good if
Yeah.
they're healthy. That's the thing.
Jack Hughes just needs to stay healthy.
Yeah.
He just can't.
So that right there, that's 8 to 9 teams ahead of them that I would put. Maybe they could fight for a wild card, but I don't really know if it's enough, especially in that Atlantic division that's going to be so top heavy, as we see a lot of these divisions are.
Yeah, I think Stevie Y, he's making a bet on his young players that he's drafted and developed over these few years. They're hoping Marco Casper, former top 10 pick, is going to take that next step in his development and maybe be that top 6 guy, along with the main guys, Dylan Larkin, Alex DeBrincat, and Lucas Raymond. They brought Patrick Kane back. He's not getting any younger, but he's still a serviceable middle 6 guy, in my opinion. He's lethal on the power play. They have Sider and Edvidson, both young defensemen who are looking to make a bigger impact. So, like, I can kind of see it happening. But I'm not thrilled about their roster unless something dramatic happens.
You've also got the forever dark horse in the Sabres, right? That are always
Poor Buffalo. Dude, JJ Paterka leaving, that hurt so many Like, I don't know what their management is doing. They just find ways to piss off their young, talented players and then sell them off, and then they go on to do great things.
Well, I gotta say, it can't be easy to convince your young guys to come back when you've consistently been one of the worst teams in hockey.
Yeah. Or you consistently trade them away.
Yeah, that too. There's a lot of things that could contribute to it, but losing definitely does not help. I want to talk a little bit about Brock Besser too, because Brock Besser was one of the big names that we were waiting on. He ends up returning to Vancouver, a Vancouver team that didn't make the playoffs this last season after dominating the year before. What does this mean for them? Because they were hot at the All-Star break, and then everything just kind of collapsed.
I think there's a huge culture change going on with that team. There was some kind of locker room drama with JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, and I think that kind of festered that, and the team just couldn't get back on track after that. And then Thatcher Demko, he also got a huge extension. He just needs to stay healthy. If he's healthy, that's a playoff team. When he's not healthy, the defense falls apart. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think Brock Besser only went back to Vancouver just because they gave him a shit ton of money.
Hey, 7x7 is nothing to sneeze at.
I think no other team was willing to give an injury-prone Brock Besser that kind of money. Because don't get me wrong, I love Brock Besser. I feel like every season he was expected to get traded to Minnesota just because he's from Minnesota. Like, I get every season, it's like, oh, Brock Besser can go to Minnesota. Brock Besser's coming to Minnesota. And it's like, no, the fuck he's not. Like, we say this every year. If he would have come to Minnesota, he would be here right now.
But this year's your year. Are we back? Are we back?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. That is huge, and we love to see that. There we go. That should fix everything. Yes, wonderful. Anyway, where was I? I was talking about Brock Besser.
Brock Besser.
Yes, Brock Besser is a big bring back for them. Like you talk about culture, I think that's something that they need to keep around. And having a tenured guy like Brock Besser, who has been there for their successes, been there for their failures, been a big part of that team, it's hard to let that guy go. It might have been a bit of an overpay, but still, you can't let him walk away like that. It's just not an option for them.
Especially when you're trying to keep Quinn Hughes around. You want to show him, hey, we're still trying to be competitive. We're trying to still make the playoffs. Please stay with us, and we'll give you a shit ton of money to do so.
Yeah, but no, there is a lot going on in the NHL. We've covered a lot of the big news, Shane. What is your favorite move that has taken place in these last couple of days of in hockey?
Favorite, that's a tough one. I do like uh James Haggins going to Boston. I think it's just really fitting because he plays for BU.
Hmm.
And so for him to play college next season in the city he was drafted by, a player of that caliber, I think that's a really good sign for Bruins fans because their team was awful last season. They're making a few moves to try to be a little bit better. I don't think it's going to set them over the edge. Traded away Marchand, a big character, a big part of that locker room, a serviceable veteran. He's gone. So you pretty much have Pasternak on an island, geeky. It's just the roster that doesn't excite me at all. But you have a player who could be a superstar for your team going forward, who's playing in a college near the facility. So I do like how that's going to create a buzz for the Bruins going forward. But in terms of big free agency deals, there's just nothing that really, as a fan, doesn't make me very excited because all I'm waiting for is Marco Rossi to re-sign with the Wild. I want my short king back. I want to stop hearing rumors about one of my favorite Minnesota players because there's like no other second line center caliber players available. Like they're trying to win now. There's no one left in the market. Just give my man his money, and if you want to trade him fucking later. But pay that man what he's worth. He had a 60-point season, and just bring him fucking back. Who cares if he's fucking short? I'm sick and tired of this narrative. I'm sick and tired of the NHL being a bunch of size queens for players that can play. You know, there's plenty of exceptions to the rule. You have Johnny Gaudreau. You have Cole Caulfield, Martin St. Louis, like short Jared Spurgeon, who's on the same team. Like short players can play in this league. Just give my man his money. He's only 23. He's only going to get better. Pay the man. That's the move I want, Jeremy. In terms of my favorite move, that would be my favorite move.
That's the one to watch out for the Wild
Yeah.
there. I gotta say the one that I kept my eye on, the one that caught my eye a little bit, that's going under the radar for good reason. Corey Perry's now a King, and we know the trend.
Guaranteed conference final, Stanley Cup final there.
Yep. We know the trend with Corey Perry, right? You sign Corey Perry, you've got a pretty good shot of making the Stanley Cup final. What is it now? 6 times in a row with him?
It's I think it was like 5 times in the past 6 years.
It's impressive. It's quite the streak. The Kings take a gamble on him. It's not going to be too much money, of course, but getting a guy
This
with
is what
you know,
helps them break the Oilers curse.
you know,
And the
it,
4 straight years losing to the Oilers ends because they have Corey Perry, so the Corey Perry curse cancels out the Oilers curse. They'll just lose in the Cup final this year.
you know what? And if I'm a Kings fan and I get to the Cup final, regardless of results, I'm ecstatic with that. But that's one of those that I thought was a little fun. Hurts my soul. Lars Eller no longer a Capital. He'll be back. Third stint with the Caps. He'll
He'll get
return.
traded back again.
He'll return. But no, it's been busy free agency. There's still a lot left. Anything else that we missed, Shane, before we wrap it up here tonight?
I want to talk about the Ducks
Talk about the Ducks.
because I don't know, because I think that team is still retooling. They have a lot of young players, but then they trade for guys like Jacob Trouba and Chris Kreider. Like, I get you're trying to be big, strong. You can see that in the prospects they drafted. They're trying to trade for bigger guys.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't necessarily, because the NHL, you play with a lot of speed.
Right.
and they're kind of trading for guys who are big, but can they move, you know?
Yeah, the Ducks have been in perpetual. I'm not even going to call it a rebuild, a retool. They're in rebuild mode right now. They have
Yeah,
been for the last, God, 10 years at this point.
sure feels like
So,
it.
something along those lines. It's been a long
Probably
time.
like 8 years
It's
now.
been a long time since the Ducks have been any semblance of good, and they
Well, they
have.
traded away Zegras.
Right, they've got talent. They've got Zegras. They've got Troy
No, they
Terry.
traded away Zegras.
Traded away Zegras. I
They
didn't.
traded him to Philly for like a second and a fourth, and some guy got thrown in there. So I think he needed a change of scenery. I think he'll be really good with Philly, playing with Mitchkov, and he's reunited with his buddy in Drysdale. So I like the move for Philly, but for Anaheim, I'm just their roster. They need their young guys to take that step, and if they will, I just don't know.
Yeah, it feels like they're playing with two very different philosophies. They're trying to be a team that's on the way up while also moving off of young talent, which is not what you need to do for a team that's feels like they're
Yep.
trying to exit a rebuild as
When
opposed to
you're
entering
making
one.
moves similar to what the Buffalo Sabres are doing, I don't think that's the right course of action. When you're giving vets contracts, but you're getting rid of young talent.
That's not how team building works. Never
Yeah.
has been.
They paid Granlund, which I love Granlund, former Wild. He's 33 years old. They gave him like a 3-year deal at 7 million per. You have to reach the cap floor somehow.
Right.
So I think he'll be good to play with some of their younger skilled guys. Like it's not enough to set them over the edge. Like again, granted, if all of their guys make that jump, they could be competitive for that wild card. But again, the Central's too stacked. Vegas, Oilers, Kings, they're not going anywhere. But I think they just want to see progress, maybe be a little bit more competitive, maybe not be such a bottom feeder next year.
I'm not ready to believe that until I see it with the Ducks, quite honestly. I feel like they've
Yeah.
taken steps back in recent years, if I'm being completely honest. I don't really understand what all their moves are about, but I'm not a hockey GM for a reason. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of In the Crease by the Triple Threat Show. We have been your hosts, Jeremy Lapidus and Shane Brisland. We're keeping you up to date on everything hockey related, so keep staying tuned in. We'll keep doing this whenever there's big hockey news. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.